Householders cultivate the path by developing meritorious actions. As mentioned earlier, when teaching the Dhamma in a suitable way for lay people or householders, rather than apply the system of the path in the form of the threefold training, Sila, Samadhi and Panya, the Buddha reformatted the practice, establishing a simpler form of training. Here he set down a new sequence of basic principles, referred to as meritorious action, Punya Kiriya, or the basis of meritorious action, Punya Kiriya Vatu. In this teaching there are likewise three factors, but with different names: generosity, dana, virtuous conduct, sila, and mental cultivation, bhavana. It is useful to understand that, similar to the threefold training, the teachings on meritorious action are also a form of study and training. Indeed, the essence of meritorious action is spiritual training. Monks, there are these three grounds for meritorious action. The ground for meritorious action consisting of generosity, the ground for meritorious action consisting of virtue, and the ground for meritorious action consisting of cultivation. One who desires the good should train in acts of merit, which have far-reaching effects and end in bliss. Let him practice generosity, righteous behavior, samacharya, and the heart of loving kindness. A wise person who cultivates these three qualities leading to happiness attains a world of joy free from misery. In this passage, after the Buddha mentions the three bases of meritorious action, he concludes by describing what one should do in regard to them. That is, one should train in acts of merit. Here the Pali states, Punya meva so sikaya. Combining these two terms results in the compound Punya Sika, training in merit. Training here refers to generating, developing, and becoming proficient in spiritual qualities, i.e., to advance on the path in a way consistent with the teaching on the threefold training. Applying the threefold training as a standard, one can compare these teachings as follows. Moral conduct, generosity and moral conduct, concentration, wisdom, mental cultivation, cultivation of mind, cultivation of wisdom, practice of loving kindness. As mentioned above, the teaching on meritorious actions for householders emphasizes a person's external environment and elementary forms of spiritual practice. This is in contrast to the teachings aimed at the monastic sangha, which emphasize a person's inner life and higher levels of practice. In the threefold training, the beginning stages of practice are incorporated in the term sila. The teaching on meritorious actions, however, stresses the way a person deals with material belongings and engages with society. And therefore, the beginning stages are divided into two factors, with the management of material things by way of generosity, reinforcing the second factor of virtuous conduct. For monks and nuns, the teaching begins with virtuous conduct. For householders, it begins with generosity and virtue. In other words, because monks and nuns do not have much to do with material things, generosity, dana, giving, plays a minor role. For this reason, in the threefold training, generosity is appended to or concealed within the factor of virtuous conduct. On the allocation of material things in the monastic sangha, look at the Vinaya. In regard to profound internal factors, the threefold training contains the two stages of concentration and wisdom. The monastic life is devoted to spiritual development, to the cultivation of higher mind, adhicitta, and higher wisdom, adhipanya. The threefold training thus clearly separates spiritual training into these two factors. In contrast, the teaching on meritorious actions contains the single term cultivation bhavana, and according to the passage above, the focus here is on the practice of loving kindness. The life of householders is directly involved with material possessions, and the search for and management of these possessions takes place in relation to society. If people do not manage their possessions well, they lose them, and both individuals and society is troubled. For this reason, it is necessary to highlight the two factors of generosity and virtuous conduct as two distinct meritorious actions. Although internal spiritual practice is important, it needs to be managed in a way appropriate to people's capabilities and available time and energy. Here the two factors of mind training and wisdom development are combined in the single factor of cultivation, bhavana, and because the distinctive feature of the householder life is an interaction with the wider society, cultivation here focuses primarily on the practice of loving kindness. To conform to the teaching above rather than use the common expression make merit, it would be more accurate to say that Buddhists are encouraged to train in merit. Punya refers to a person's superior qualities and abilities, physical, verbal, mental, and spiritual. We are encouraged to increase and refine our merits through the training in body, speech, mind, and wisdom. This is a form of self-development. Our lives will then gradually become more refined and prosperous. The three bases of meritorious action are as follows. 1. Dana, giving, generosity, liberality. 2. Sila, upright behavior, a healthy, supportive interaction with other people, free from exploitation. 3. Bhavana, the cultivation of the mind and of wisdom. In the ancient times, venerable elders taught and transmitted this teaching on meritorious action to newer generations. By the time the commentaries were written, an additional 7 factors had been added. These additional factors are indeed elaborations on the original 3. 1. Dana. An additional 2 factors are added. Patidana, offering the chance to others to share one's merit by doing good deeds together, and Patanumodana, rejoicing in the merit of others by delighting in and supporting their good actions. 2. Sila. Two factors are added. Apachayana, to be obliging, courteous, humble, and respectful, to honor one's elders and virtuous people, to have good manners as conforms to one's culture and tradition, and Vaya-vacha, to help serve and support others, to endeavor in beneficial activities. 3. Bhavana. 2 factors are added. Dhamma savana, to listen to Dhamma teachings, which also includes reading useful texts, and Dhamma desana, to teach the Dhamma to others. Special factor. Dittu ju karma, to make one's views upright. This factor must accompany all the other factors so that one's actions are performed with correct understanding and right intention. This is equivalent to inspecting each activity, and it guarantees true progress and good results. In addition of these extra factors comprises the 10 bases of meritorious action. 1. Dana maya, merit by way of giving. 2. Sila maya, merit by way of upholding moral principles and acting virtuously. 3. Bhavanamaya, merit by way of cultivation. 4. Apachayana Maya, merit by way of respectful behavior. 5. Vayavata Maya, merit by way of serving others. 6. Patidana Maya, merit by way of sharing one's goodness with others. 7. Patanumodana Maya, merit by way of rejoicing in the goodness of others. 8. Dhamma Savana Maya, merit by way of listening to the Dhamma. 9. Dhamma Desana Maya, merit by way of teaching the Dhamma. 10. Dittu Ju Karma, merit by way of making one's views upright. C. The Noble Eightfold Path and a system of training. The question arises why the factors in the path and the same factors in the threefold training are presented in a different order. The Eightfold Path begins with right view and right thought, and concludes with right concentration. Why does the teaching on the threefold training begin with right speech, which belongs to the group pertaining to virtuous conduct, and end with right view and right thought, which belong to the group on wisdom? Before answering this question, let us review the link between cessation, nirodha, and the path. The path arises as a consequence of people applying natural laws to benefit their lives. The path is a way of practice established in order to produce results in harmony with a natural process. The path is the starting point of applying one's understanding of nature and creating a method of practice. It is the bridge between nature and practical methods used by people to suit specific circumstances. The path is the key principle of spiritual practice. As a complementary teaching, the threefold training takes the essence of the path and creates a systematic course of practice. By adapting and organizing the eight path factors, the details and emphasis of this teaching varies according to the objective of specific situations or levels of practice, which results in a different sequence of factors from that outlined in the Eightfold Path. As the path is the key principle of spiritual practice, it focuses on the essential ingredients of practice. On its own, the Eightfold Path simply lists these essential factors. This is similar to presenting a list of tools which are required to accomplish a task, or to examine a road and analyzing its components. At this stage, one does not yet state how these various things are going to be used. In the Eightfold Path, the factors which function within an individual Dhamma practitioner are ordered according to their relationship to one another. Here, right view is listed as the first factor and the starting point, because if one lacks this single factor, none of the other factors can arise. This is similar to making a journey. One must know which path to take. At the very least, one needs to know where to begin, for without this knowledge, the journey cannot take place. Spiritual practice is the same. To begin with, one requires an understanding, or at least a proper confidence, of the path of practice to be undertaken. From this point, one is then able to reflect and act accordingly. Practice relies on a foundation of understanding, which is similar to a person's starting capital. When right view clears the way or breaks the ground, the subsequent path factors arise as a consequence. One's views, beliefs, understanding, and attitudes shape the way one thinks and reflects. When one thinks correctly and in a forward-looking way, one develops a clearer understanding. Thoughts shape one's speech. When one reflects well and clearly, one speaks clearly. Likewise, the nature and extent of one's reflections shape the nature and extent of one's actions. When one is able to reflect on things well and to discuss or share these thoughts with others, this directs and influences one's actions. In turn, the sphere or range of one's thoughts, speech, and actions shape how one earns a livelihood. Speech, actions, and ways of earning a living all require effort. In order for one's effort to be successful, one must apply regular and persistent mindfulness. With the guidance of mindfulness, the mind becomes one-pointed and stable. If one begins with correct, wholesome understanding, beliefs and views, i.e., one is endowed with the right view, one's thoughts, speech, actions, etc., will unfold accordingly. They too will be sama, correct, complete, and true. As one gradually develops these 8 factors, one's spiritual practice deepens. The threefold training focuses on practical application, organizing the path factors into various stages of spiritual practice in order for these factors to bear fruit in a systematic way. In a similar fashion, after listing the set of tools at hand and knowing each one's function, one then determines the order in which these tools are to be used. One specifies how each tool is to be used at different stages of work. The threefold training shifts the focus from the mutual relationship of the path factors within an individual to a person's relationship or to his or her environment or society. It shifts the emphasis from a person's internal spiritual life to the external circumstances. For example, instead of emphasizing how right view leads to right thought, and subsequently to right speech and right action, here the teachings focus outwards to what exactly are the details of right speech and right action, and how one should speak and act with members of one's community. It determines the nature of one's outward behavior, which has an effect and influence on one's thoughts and reflections. For example, it sets down a set of guidelines and regulations for training, for living one's life, and for practice, in order that people develop self-restraint and are able to discern by themselves what is suitable behavior and conduct. Although the threefold training begins by focusing on people's relationship to their society and environment, it circles back to the individual's internal spiritual life, and it is this point that highlights the true meaning of Sikha as training, study, development. In this sense, right speech, right action, and right livelihood are matters of moral conduct, sila. The training, development, and growth of right speech, right action, and right livelihood as conducive to solving problems and making an end of suffering is referred to as training in higher virtue, adi sila sika. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration comprise the group of mental collectedness, samadhi. The training and development of these 3 factors as conducive to the end of suffering is referred to as training in higher mind, adhicitta sika. Right view and right thought make up the group of wisdom. The development of these 2 factors as conducive to the end of suffering is referred to as training in higher wisdom, adhipanya sika. The threefold training changes the focus from the mutual relationship of the factors described in the Eightfold Path to the gradual training of an individual. Moreover, it begins with common or basic spiritual qualities and moves to more refined ones, from those aspects of spiritual practice that are easy to see to profound qualities that are difficult to define and manage. It begins with the training of body and speech, and then focuses on the training of the mind and of wisdom, In other words, the threefold training shifts from the interrelated functioning of the path factors at every moment in an individual to longer intervals of time in the process of training, which is divided into different stages according to the prominent role of specific factors at each particular stage. This training begins with basic moral conduct, which emphasizes external behavior of body and speech. It then moves on to the refined level of concentration, to the development of the mind, in order to support and develop wisdom, so that wisdom can be used most effectively. The threefold training is thus a complete system of practice, presented as a way to train people in the context of their everyday lives by recognizing that people live in a social environment. It is organized into stages which comprise longer intervals of time and are ordered according to those spiritual factors which require special attention at each particular stage. It is important to note here that regardless of which stage a practitioner is training in, whether it be moral conduct, concentration, or wisdom, each and every path factor, from right view to right concentration, is operating and functional during all times of the process. To state that one is training at the level of moral conduct, concentration, or wisdom is simply a way to announce that at this time one is giving special emphasis and importance to developing specific factors or a group of factors, or that at this time specific factors have been summoned to play a salient role. From one perspective, it appears that there are two systems of practice, an external training and an internal training. These two systems are connected, and the validity of both is acknowledged in the Buddhist training. In the Buddhist teachings. The relationship between the levels of practice outlined in the threefold training and the function of the factors in the Eightfold Path can be described by using the following analogy. A man is driving a car on a long journey. He begins in a distant flat landscape, passes through a labyrinth mountain range, and ends in the middle of a large congested city. The journey can be divided into three stages. First is a long stretch in the countryside where the road is flat. The middle stage is in the mountains, winding around the hillsides and passing precipitous, dangerous ravines. The final stage is in the city, which contains numerous roads, alleys, crowded buildings, and bustling people, and a place where someone not highly skilled would have great difficulty finding his destination. This man has never driven a car before and begins his apprenticeship by undertaking this journey. He hopes that by the time he reaches his goal, he will have become an expert driver. During the first leg of the journey, the man must become skilled at using his hands and feet and become familiar with the mechanics and instruments of the car. Moreover, he must be careful to avoid parts of the road that are too soft or contain potholes. The main focus of his work is simply to apply a normal sense of caution to ensure that the car makes progress. If the road is flat and he has become skilled at the basic mechanics of driving, the car should function with ease. During the second leg, the man must use a lot of strength and caution, guiding the car around the sharp bends and along the steep ravines, slowing down or speeding up depending on whether he is driving up or down hills, and keeping the car steady. The main task at this stage is strength, control, constant vigilance and awareness, and concentration. One may ask whether he no longer needs to pay attention to the car's engine and equipment, or to avoid potholes in places where the road is soft. The answer is that he must still pay careful attention to these things. Indeed, he must be even more careful than before. But at this stage it is not necessary to mention these things, because if he is not yet skilled in regard to the car's mechanics, or if the road is completely broken up and uneven, he will be out of control and may have to abandon the trip entirely. Those things he should now give special attention to are the road's shoulders, lanes, curves, inclines, and slopes. The success of this second stage of the journey may also depend on other factors. For example, when he reaches these mountains, he may become fearful and faint-hearted, and stop to or turn around. He may venture forwards, but drive off a cliff, similar to someone who goes insane while practicing meditation, or whose practice deviates from the true path. Or he may become enchanted by the scenery and park his car like someone who is captivated by the attainments of jhana. In the third leg of the journey, there is a dazzling number of streets, alleys, and crossroads, billboards, posters, and road signs, traffic signals, buildings, vehicles, and pedestrians. The driver must have a keen eye, understanding the different signs and traffic signals, be able to read the information about different landmarks, know where to turn, and be able to make decisions quickly and accurately. The main task at this stage is to not get lost. The first stage in the open countryside, which requires caution in regard to ordinary forward movement, similar to virtuous conduct, sila. The second stage in the mountains, which emphasizes strength, control, awareness, and stability, similar to concentration, samadhi. The third stage in the city, which requires quick wit and not getting lost, is similar to wisdom, panya. It is evident that although each stage emphasizes different mental qualities, the road itself contains similar attributes throughout. This analogy provides a broad overview. In real-life practice, these different factors are continually being developed as subsidiary repeating stages in a larger process. This is similar to a long motorway, which contains a series of alternating flat, steep, and intricate sections. This is confirmation of the link between the threefold training, which emphasizes external practice, and the Eightfold path, which highlights the function of internal spiritual factors. When one trains in moral conduct, the mind becomes concentrated. When the mind is concentrated, one reflects with wisdom. Wisdom is equivalent to right view, the first factor of the path. Right view results in right thought, which in turn leads to right speech, right action, and right livelihood, in accord with the interrelationship of the path factors. Right view thus generates and fosters moral conduct, which then leads to the ensuing path factors. Moreover, right view enhances the quality of spiritual training, and both strengthens and refines all the other path factors. From a preliminary perspective, this cycle of the threefold training is similar to three distinct ways of practice, functioning in parallel at all times. An example of this is a description in the Visuddhimagga of the meditation on breathing, Anapanasati, which in a nutshell is as follows. To be vigilant and to check that one's behavior is the most suitable and effective for this activity is the training in higher morality, Adisila Sika. To make the mind steadfast and stable, i.e. to remain with the activity or object of attention, is the training in higher concentration, Adicitta Sika. To apply wisdom or the knowledge arising during this activity is the training in higher wisdom, Panyasika. The threefold training is a teaching frequently presented by the Buddha, Bahula Dhammi Kata. The following passage describes the sequential nature of this training. This is morality, this is concentration, this is wisdom. Concentration which has been ripened by morality brings great fruit and blessings. Wisdom which has been ripened by concentration brings great fruit and blessings. The mind which has been ripened by wisdom becomes completely free from the taints, that is, from the taint of sensuality, from the taint of becoming, and from the taint of ignorance. The interrelationship between Sila, Samadhi, and Panya is visible in everyday life. When one conducts oneself purely, is confident of one's moral purity, does not fear punishment or being harmed by one's adversaries, is not anxious about criticism or being ostracized, and is not agitated out of a sense of self-loathing over one's bad deeds. The mind is peaceful and one remains focused on one's thoughts, speech, and actions. The more peaceful and concentrated is one's mind, the clearer is one's thinking process, and the quicker and more agile is one's understanding. This is similar to water which has not been stirred or shaken. The surface is calm, the sediment settles on the bottom, and the water is clear, enabling a person to see things clearly. At higher levels of Dhamma practice, which give rise to higher knowledge and eliminate mental defilement, it is even more important for the mind to be tranquil and clear and to possess one-pointed concentration, which is able to suspend cognition by way of the sense doors and sustain attention solely at the chosen object of awareness in order to completely eliminate mental sediment. The Buddha occasionally presented the threefold training as a simple format for spiritual practice, and these teachings are often referred to by later generations of Buddhists. For example, the threefold training is an important component of the key teaching known as the Ovada Patimokkha, of which one verse contains three clauses: one sabba passa akaratnang, to refrain from evil; two kusala nu kusala sampada, to cultivate what is wholesome; three Sachita Pariyodapatnang, to purify the mind. It is important to emphasize the importance of right view of the wisdom factors. All Buddhist systems of practice, whether they correspond with the Eightfold Path or with the threefold training, begin and end with wisdom. Although the threefold training begins with moral conduct, this conduct relies as a starting capital on an understanding of those things which one is about to practice. That is, it relies on right view. But because this basic form of understanding involves simply knowing in which direction to proceed and where to begin, it is not included as a separate stage in the broad teaching of the threefold training. When a practitioner possesses a fundamental understanding or a correct set of beliefs, he or she begins in the training in moral conduct, in physical actions, speech, and livelihood. When right moral conduct is accomplished, a person trains at more refined levels by developing the mind, samadhi, and finally by developing wisdom to the point of liberation from ignorance. Wisdom is in fact cultivated continuously throughout the process of spiritual training. At the beginning, the understanding referred to as right view may simply be a belief in accord with reasoned analysis. In later stages of practice, one's original understanding or beliefs will gradually develop and become more clear by means of proper reflection, contemplation, and investigation, and by witnessing the fruits of one's practice and the increased strength of the spiritual faculties, until wisdom reaches the stage of understanding all things according to the truth of liberation and of realizing Nibbana. Reasoned understanding or rational belief becomes a true and complete knowing inherent in the mind. This middle way of practice gives rise to understanding, jnana karani, gives rise to vision, chakra karani, and leads to peace, to awakening to Nibbana. The path culminates in wisdom, which plays a key role in the realization of the goal. For this reason, there are passages in the scriptures in which two more factors are added to the end of the Eightfold Path: right knowledge, samayana, corresponding to jnana karani and chakra karani, and right liberation, samavimutti, corresponding to peace, awakening, nibbana. Right view is thus similar to a bridge leading from ignorance, avidya, to true knowledge, vidya. When one possesses true knowledge, vidya, right knowledge, samayana, arises and one achieves right liberation. Note that the three factors of right view, samaditi, right effort, samavayama, and right mindfulness, samasati, play a special role because they constantly present in combination with the other path factors. Their important participatory role can be explained by using the analogy of making a journey. Right view is like a lamp or a compass, which allows one to see the path ahead and to be confident that one is traveling in the right direction, leading to the goal. Right effort is like applying energy to advance, or to using strength to propel oneself forward. Right mindfulness is like an instrument which controls, guides, and guards one's movements, so that one remains on the path, travels at the proper pace, and avoids danger. All levels of practice, whether it be of moral conduct, concentration, or wisdom, thus rely on these three path factors.